everyone, my name is Paige and today I'm going to be doing a video that I haven't done in a while, and I'm just going to be giving you some fantasy recommendations. And I would also love to hear recommendations from you as well down in the comments below, so as you're watching this, if I've definitely missed a book that you really love, make sure to leave me a comment and I'll try to pick it up. I know a million other people have done this type of video, so I'm not going to be recommending stuff like Game of Thrones and A Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm certainly not going to be recommending Throne of Glass because I hate that series, but I just want you to keep in mind that everyone has pretty much recommended these, so that's why I'm not recommending them. And then one other thing to keep in mind too is that usually I'm pretty bad at reading series that have like just come out, so some of these recommendations might be a little bit older, but let's get started. So the first series I want to talk about is one that I read back when I was either in like starting high school or like very end of middle school, and that's L.J. Smith's Night World series. I freaking love this series. I have this beautiful set of hardcovers, and then I also have the original like paperbacks that came out where there were 3 books in one paperback. But I love this series. It's got vampires, werewolves, shapeshifters, all that kind of stuff. This was kind of like regaining popularity, I think, when Twilight had come out, but it is just really interesting and like really short and sweet stories about like different couples. And there's also like a mating bond thing, and I don't know. There's just a lot of interesting stuff going on in this series, and obviously there's 9 books. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 books. There's supposed to be a 10th, but let's be honest, we're never getting that book. If you've read this series and you know L.J. Smith, you know we're never getting that final book. So yeah, we've waited 20 years for it. Literally 20 years. This is the hill I'm gonna die on with this series, is that we're never gonna get that last book. Anyway, if you're feeling like you're kind of missing that Twilight phase, definitely pick this series up because it's really good. Also, a series that's a bit of a throwback to my earlier like reading days is the Inkheart series, and this is by Cornelia Funke. I absolutely love this series. I think a lot of people have read it, or a lot of people have heard of it and just never picked it up. Ugh, the phone's ringing. What I really love about this series is that the main character, she and her father, are able to read aloud from stories, and then they can bring characters into our world or they can dive into theirs. And I just think that idea is so cool. And I also heard that we're getting a 4th one to this series finally in like 2020 or 2021, so that's so exciting for me. It's a middle grade series and it's super easy to get through, and I just love it. There are so many different characters and just a lot of adventures that they all go on, and it's really fun. I feel like another author that a lot of people don't talk about when they talk about fantasy is Robin Mckinley, and one of my favorites of hers is Rose Daughter. Rose Daughter is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I think this is actually the sequel to Beauty, which is more of an accurate Beauty and the Beast retelling, but this is also very, very good and something that I haven't read in a really long time, so I don't remember a whole lot from it. I just remember enjoying it so much. And then another one that's really great by her is Spindle's End. God, I love this cover. And I think this is supposed to be more of a Sleeping Beauty retelling. So both of these are really great fantasy books. If you're looking for a fantasy book that's a little more adult-centered and kind of like steamy romance, I definitely recommend Nocturne by Siri James. This is like a forbidden love type story, and I don't want to give too much away because it is a bit of a spoiler if I say what the like supernatural element of it is, but I just know that it's a really steamy romance, and if that's something you're looking for, definitely pick this up, and it's fairly short too. Okay, so another book that I've read that I know is fantasy, but I haven't read it in a while, is Star Touch Queen, and this is by Roshani Chokshi. There are 2 other books that kind of go in this series. There's the sequel and then the story novellas that go along with it. I haven't read either of these yet, but I read this one and I remember really enjoying it, so definitely recommend this. From what I also remember, this is sort of a retelling of Greek mythology, the mythology surrounding Hades and Persephone. I personally love the Hades Persephone storyline, trope, whatever, and I think it's really interesting, and this world is so beautiful and lush and just excellently described, so I would definitely recommend checking these out. Another series that I actually read last year, and I haven't read the entire thing yet, is the Darker Shade of Magic series by V.E. Schwab. Everyone and anyone has pretty much recommended this book or talked about it or something, and there are a million reviews that you can go check out that are going to be way better than what I described, but I just remember really loving the world that this is set in, and it's so complex, but the magic system is just really interesting as well. I really enjoy the characters, so all of that just made this a really good recommendation. And also the fact that it's set in London, I just love that because, you know, I used to live in London. So another book that I'm going to recommend, and I only have the sequel with me, is Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. I actually haven't read the sequel yet, even though I have it on my bookshelf. I really loved Wicked Saints because I think the religious aspect of it is very interesting, which is something you sometimes don't get a lot of in fantasy books because it's just kind of overlooked for like magic systems and stuff. But because it's like one of the main storylines slash plot points of of the book, it's like the main driving force sometimes, and I think that's really interesting. While the characters, some of them fell a little flat for me in this series, I did just really enjoy the atmosphere and the world that it's set in. And I think also too, I think I like my fantasy books to be a little bloody, which this series definitely is, and you know, has a little bit of romance and stuff like that, so definitely check out Wicked Saints. My next fantasy recommendation is one where I've actually finished the series, which is kind of rare, but it's only a duology, so that's The Wrath in the Dawn and The Rose and the Dagger by Renee Ahdieh. I think that's how it's pronounced because I heard someone else on BookTube pronounce it that way. Again, another fairy tale retelling, this time of 1001 Nights, and I flew through both of these when I was living in London. I read each of them in just a day, which is pretty amazing. I mean, they're not super long, but also like, I was busy. I was getting my master's. Anyway, I love this series. I love how lush and just stunning the world is, and the characters are really interesting too. I think their love story is really something that's interesting and made me want to read a lot more of it. I'm actually kind of sad this was only a duology because it was really good. Also love the cover. Not this one. I hate this cover, but I love this cover. There's also other characters that come into play in this. It's not only about the romance, and there's like a war going on and all of that, so there's political strife, which is always interesting for a fantasy book, especially when it's set in a world where there's magic and stuff like that, and people are kind of apprehensive and whatever, and like this girl that's in this is seen as kind of like an underdog because like people aren't really trusting of her, and like why hasn't the king killed her yet, and I don't know, it's just very, very interesting, so definitely check this one out too. My next recommendation is one that I'm actually reading the series of right now, and that's Three Dark Crowns by Kendara Blake. Okay, so in the past, I think 4 days, I've read 3 of these books, 3 Dark Crowns, 1 Dark Throne, and right now I'm reading 2 Dark Reigns, and then I need to read 5 Dark Fates, and then the Queens of Fenburn. Oh my gosh, I love this series. I love all the characters, I love the magic system, I love the world that it's in. It's just so interesting, and I really wasn't expecting to like this. I'm not sure why. It was just something that I had seen around a lot, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is so overhyped, but then I read it and I was like, holy crap, this is so good. I think what I like about stories like this too, where there are 3 like different sets of characters, is that you kind of get to pick and choose who your favorite one is, and then they evolve over time, and there's plot twists and stuff going on, and you're just like, holy crap, like what's going on? I don't know. If you're interested in royalty and magic and fantasy, definitely pick up the 3 Dark Crowns series. I think I'm starting to realize too, I really like my fantasy series as well, is like if it has magic, romance, and royalty, I'm sold. Yet another series that I read while I was in London, I read it very, very quickly, was the Winter's Curse trilogy by Marie Rutkoski. And she has another book coming out that's set in this world this year or next year, whenever it is, and I'm so excited. Anyway, this series is just incredible and I love it so much. Again, political strife, royalty. The main girl in this is the commander's daughter of the like royal army, so that's very interesting. And then she meets this guy and like there's romance, but then like they're star-crossed lovers, they're not supposed to like each other, and oh, there's just so much going on and I really love it, and definitely pick this series up. I don't know if I mentioned it, but like I also just love the covers. I think what's also interesting about books like this is that the main character, Kestrel, she has the ability to kind of make a decision. So of course it's like get married or like join the army, and I really like worlds where girls aren't just only forced into one kind of thing that they have to do, so that was very interesting for me in this book. I don't know, once you read the books, like at first I was like, why are these covers like girls in dresses if she's gonna be joining the military? But it all makes sense, and I love it so much. You see these characters really grow and develop over time, and oh, it's so, so amazing. So amazing. Okay, this next one I'm only going to talk about very briefly because again, everyone and anyone has either read it, mentioned it, or in some aspect talked about it, and that's the Cruel Prince series by Holly Black. So I've read Cruel Prince and The Wicked King. Obviously haven't read Queen of Nothing yet because it's not out yet, but I really enjoyed this series. I actually liked Cruel Prince better than The Wicked King. I know, I think a lot of people are gonna disagree with me on that, but I just thought that it was more interesting when Jude was kind of like struggling to find her place in the world rather than like, see, I don't want to give spoilers away. All I'm gonna say is, for a long time, I wasn't reading fae books because of A Court of Thorns and Roses, and then I picked this up and I really enjoyed it, so I don't know if that strikes your fancy, but I would give it a try. Again, magic, royalty, romance, This hits all my checkpoints. Okay, this next series, obviously I'm just gonna leave here on my shelf because you can tell how much I love it, and that's Revolt series by Stephenie Garber. Oh my god, it's so good. I was trying to explain this series to my boyfriend the other day and I wasn't doing a very good job of it, so hopefully I can like kind of get it down here. Basically, in the first book, there is a carnival every year that's very magical, and there's a lot of like interesting things going on there, and there's this mysterious figure called Legend that no one has ever like really met or seen, and they don't know who he is because he's constantly changing, and there's just like a lot of different things going on there. There's a lot of mystery, there's a lot of romance, there's a lot of plot twists and intrigue, and I love the writing. The writing just really makes this series for me, so I definitely recommend checking this out. It's also just like super easy to get through. I mean, there's only 3 books and you'll like certainly fly through them. Okay, another series that I'm going to talk about is down here, and one that again I'm not going to take off my shelves because there's just so many of them. But it is the Shadow and Bone series, the Grisha trilogy, and then the Six of Crows, Crooked Kingdom, King of Scars part of the series as well. I've only read Shadow and Bone, Siege and Storm, Six of Crows, and Crooked Kingdom. I haven't read King of Scars, Language of Thorns, or Ruin and Rising yet, but oh my gosh, I love this series. So originally I'd read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom first. Again, everyone has pretty much talked about this, so you probably know what it's about, which I'm not really going to go into. Again, there are probably people that have done a way better job describing it than I ever will, but I just want to say that Shadow and Bone and Siege and Storm are really good, and my favorite character is Alina, as you can tell from this little print that I got recently. I love her so much. And then I really want to go back and reread Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom because I think I would understand the world a little bit better, so I recommend if you're going to read the series, read these 3 first, then these 2, and then probably these 2. Language of Thorns is like a series of like short little stories that are kind of set in that world. Again, magic system, there's royalty, but they're not super important. There's political strife, a lot of political strife. There's wars going on. It's just really like jam-packed with action, and that's why I really love it. And I love my girl Alina, so yeah. Another recommendation from Roshani Chakshi would be The Gilded Wolves. I really enjoyed this book as well. The Silvered Serpents is coming out next year, so I haven't read that one yet, obviously. I listened to this one on audiobook, and I kind of wish I had actually read it because I think in the audiobook I lost some of the story. There were certain points to me that were a little bit confusing. A lot of people compare this to Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom because it's that kind of found family trope and people that are joined together under like different circumstances. They go on a heist. There's a lot of different things going on. But I think with stories like this, what really makes it are the characters. So if you're looking for like a character-driven novel, definitely pick this up. And also there are just like fantastical elements. The cover's stunning, and Roshani Chakshi is an amazing writer, so why would you not read it? Okay, again, another series a lot of people have talked about is Amber and Ashes, Torch Against the Night, and Rebirth the Gates. I've read all of them, and I think I read Rebirth the Gates way too far after I read the first 2 of these because I was like, what's going on? I remember really loving this series, and there are just a lot of different elements. Again, everyone's really talked about this before. There's 3 different points of view that are going on throughout this, so you kind of get a view of the world through 3 different sets of eyes, obviously, which I also really enjoy about fantasy books because different people have different conceptions about it and different roles in that society, so that's always really interesting. All that being said, pick this up. Really, really good. And that's An Enchantment of Ravens and Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I read Enchantment of Ravens first, obviously, because it came out first, and I really, really enjoyed it. And then I also have read Sorcery of Thorns, and I also really enjoyed this one. I gave An Enchantment of Ravens 5 out of 5 stars, and I gave Sorcery of Thorns 4 out of 5 stars. An Enchantment of Ravens is like a fae kind of world, so I was apprehensive about picking it up because, again, my feelings about A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is kind of ruined fae for me, but then I read this, and I was like, okay, maybe they're okay. Like, they have some redeeming qualities, and there's just an interesting story and an interesting world. I really liked the main characters. It's just really fun and really easy to get through. And then in Sorcery of Thorns, I thought the main character was just not as likable for me. Her magical powers and everything that she had was just kind of like, it was interesting, but it wasn't as interesting as An Enchantment of Ravens. However, I did like in Sorcery of Thorns that it was set in this like library setting where libraries are really special. Though I think the other thing about this was the villain was kind of laughable for me in this, and that was kind of what drove down my star rating as well. He was like, he's evil, and I was like, but why? But I think, again, for both of these, what really brings it home for me is the writing. As of right now, those are all of my recommendations just based on everything that I have on my shelves here at home. I'm sure there are other stuff that I could recommend to you. I'm actually looking for recommendations, like I said in the beginning of this video, so definitely leave me recommendations down below, but not like Throne of Glass, Grisha, you know, which I already mentioned, Game of Thrones, none of that. I want want to hear something that not a lot of people have talked about, or maybe a ton of people have talked about and I just haven't mentioned here, just give me your best fantasy recommendations because I love reading fantasy. I've also mentioned this in one of my last videos, but we are still selling book sleeves on SoCal Girls, and if you use coupon code COBWEB before the end of the month, you can get 20% off our Halloween Harvest book sleeve collection, which I highly recommend doing. Some of my favorites are the space one that we have here. This one's actually glow in the dark, and I love how perfectly they can fit a variety of sizes of books. For example, like this is a hardcover and this fits perfectly in here. These can pretty much fit up to 600 pages worth. For example, I really like this tarot card one because it really closely matches the Caraval series, because tarot cards like play a really important part in the series. And this finale book is pretty big. And look at that. Sticks out the top, but it totally fits. So you should definitely get one of these. And if you're not interested in one of our Halloween or Harvest sleeves, make sure to use code PAGE10 and you can get 10% pretty much off your entire purchase. We also have summer sleeves that are still left over from our summer collection that have been discounted. So all of the information is going to be down below. You guys can find everything down there, as well as my Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye! Oh my god, that scared me. My books just fell over.